To take us through the importance of corporate governance, I'm joined by Saurav Banerjee, our Director of Finance, NDTV's Director of Finance, with a long experience in looking at balance sheets, understanding, I mean, you've worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers in the past, you understand in which how balance sheets sometimes hide things, which on the face of it, someone who's not trained to look at it will think everything's fine, but actually it's hidden somewhere where you realize something is unethical is happening at the core of what otherwise looks like a fine shell.
So, Onin, I'm reminded of a French proverb which literally translated into English means there is no pillow so soft as a clear conscience. In the corporate parlance, it is basically the conscience of the organization, which is the corporate governance. So you can hide things, like some of the organizations, big organizations did, and they got caught later on. I'm talking about Enron, or Indian example is Satyam. But you can't do it for a very long time. At the end of the day, people do find out. So in terms of, like valuations and stuff like that, so there's a research which was conducted by McKinsey some time back, and 80% of the respondents, who are essentially investors, they came back saying that they give higher premium to companies which are better governed as opposed to companies which are not so well governed. And you'll be surprised to know that the premiums are as high as 27%.
27% premium for a company which is better governed.
That's right.
In fact, I was looking at some of the writing and speeches of, the well-known valuation teacher and professor of NYU, that's Ashwath Damodaran, and he actually puts a lot of store on even reading the way in which a board is built. Is the board independent enough, or is it just going to say yes to whatever the management says and hide whatever the management is doing? But, when I look at, let's say, all that we have access to when I look at a company is P&L statement, balance sheet, certain things in the news. How do you track what is happening in corporate governance? What do you look at?
Look, if the management of the company wants to perpetuate fraud, it will find a way of doing it, right? You can have all regulations around it, they will find a way of doing it. So ethical behavior is more a matter of spirit, than the letter of it. Again, the companies that I talked about, on the face of it, they all complied with high corporate governance requirement, but inside they were perpetuating fraud, and they imploded.
So there's a saying, and I know commonly people say that if a person is if he's a chore, then surely that's a business worth putting into money because he's going to make money. But actually a chore takes away shareholder value, right? So corporate governance, who is it for? Who is it supposed to protect?
Yeah. So very good question, and I can think of two parts to it. One is how do you standardize corporate ethical behavior? Right? That's the question you were asking.
Right, absolutely.
People hide things within the balance sheet, and who is it meant to protect? So let us start with the stakeholders of the organizations. Who are the stakeholders? The shareholders, the investors, the lenders, employees, and so on and so forth. And there are certain legislation or regulations around corporate governance which are kind of built in within our system. And what are they? I mean, there are 4 or 5 such bodies. The first being the Companies Act. The Companies Act lays responsibilities on the board and the management of the company, how the board meeting should be conducted, how the audit committee should be, related party transactions and stuff like that. Then there is the SEBI, which basically they have jurisdiction over listed companies and it protects investors through various regulations and guidelines. The third body is the stock exchange, the listing agreement that is there between the companies and the stock exchange. That is pretty detailed. It talks about 5 or 6 key elements. One is the board of directors, because at the end of the day, who is responsible for ensuring corporate governance? Now, it's the head and brain of an organization. So what is the head and brain of the organization? Head and brain is basically the management and the board of directors. And within the management, it is the CEO and the CFO who have an additional responsibility to ensure governance. And within the board of directors, it is the independent directors who have an additional responsibility of protecting the interests of the shareholders. So the listing agreement talks about how the board of directors should be constituted, how the board should be constituted. Say, for example, if the chairman of the board is an executive director, then 50% of the board should be independent. Right. If the chairman is non-executive, then 1/3 should be independent directors. Similarly, audit committee, which is a subcommittee of the board, and looks at financials, disclosures, and other governance requirement, should have 3 members, and at least two-thirds of them should be independent. And then there are other, like I talked about, CEO, CFO's additional role. There's a certification which the CEO and the CFO have to give every quarter, basically saying that they've reviewed the financials and the internal controls are in place and everything is kosher. And then there are reports and compliances which a listed company have to kind of adhere to in terms of in the annual report there is one section about compliance on corporate governance. Every quarter a report has to go to the stock exchanges, which has to be signed by the compliance officer and the CEO, which talks about all these things. So then there is the Institute of Chartered Accountants, which lays down how
the standards through which you're going to put out your accounts.
That's right. Accounting standards. So basically, the financials and the disclosures represent true and fair view of the state of affairs of the company. That's what it does. And then there is the Institute of Company Secretaries, which talks about how the board meetings should be conducted.
But when you start a company, let's say I started a new company, it's still a learning curve, right? A lot of times you don't realize what you're doing is not ethical.
Yeah, and that is what you should not do.
Right.
And as I said, it is the spirit of governance which is more important than just the letter of it. So basically, are you asking whether legislation can enforce corporate ethical behavior?
I'm taking the case of, let's say, the Welspun. You know about the Welspun controversy, where they appear to have sold what they call Egyptian cotton in bed sheets and stuff to Target, and it's really costing them. There are 2 class action lawsuits which are coming in. Now, it's still not clear whether they knew about it. It's not clear whether they were misled by their suppliers. And therefore, the onus then actually becomes much more on you to even check what your suppliers' corporate governance levels are, right?
Right. So I guess that is where your internal control framework comes into play. And when you look at all these regulations, there are, regulations which, kind of ensure that or that the internal control systems of the companies are in place. And then there are audits. So the internal auditor's job is to look at all the control systems within an organization, which includes how ethical your vendors are. So all these things have to be there. But again, going back to your basic question on can legislation enforce corporate ethical behavior? Now let me give you 2 examples. One of, say, companies like Enron or Satyam, where on the face of it seemed that they had great governance structure and they got awards for it, but it imploded internally, right? Let me also give an example of a company which we have all heard of, Berkshire Hathaway by Warren Buffett.
Exactly.
Now, on the face of it, the company, the board has many relatives of the management, but the company has been returning 22% year on year to the shareholders for the last 35 years, and it is one of the most ethical companies. So it is the spirit of compliance which is more important than the letter of it.
Sometimes is corporate governance the regulations, and that's again the point about the spirit versus the letter. Regulations like giving out your quarterly numbers. I know it increases transparency once you're listed, but sometimes it also creates valuation fluctuations, right? Because you might have a strategy which is going to take you through quarters where you will have bad numbers, and then because of the reporting norms, you're forced to continuously report numbers which the markets might take negatively, and then that puts pressure on you as a person who manages finance, a CEO, to actually cater to the markets rather than the business itself.
Yeah, that's true. But the reality is what you're doing is giving information to the market, and while you're giving information to the market, you're also giving information.
Commentary.
Commentary, and also you're giving information to the stakeholders of the company, like your investors, your shareholders, and you obviously have laid down some plan for the future. They're saying, okay, that is our goal, and that's where we want to reach, and these are all milestones.
And you feel that as long as you're being transparent about both the numbers and your strategy, it shouldn't affect you.
It shouldn't affect you. And if you want to be like, make it really clear to your shareholders where you're headed towards. Then some companies give guidance.
Right.
They give guidance and they say that this is where we will be after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and based on that guidance, the quarterly number, so they deliver or they don't deliver. And
I guess when we're talking about our guidance, where you can take a look at the IT companies who actually have come in middle and been transparent and said our guidance was a little over ambitious. Maybe we won't be able to do it. So that's the importance of corporate governance. So we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming in, Saurav Banerjee. We hope we had too much of a gap. We'll get you back sooner next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.